Hey, I'm Sam. Welcome to Brickwall Pictures. No Other Choice is South Korea's submission to the Best International Feature Film category at the 2026 Academy Awards. And I'll tell you right now, it is a lock for one of the 5 nomination spots. If you want my predictions, I'll call it right now that the real international Oscar category is a race between The Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, It Was Just an Accident, and No Other Choice, with all that's left of you being a potential dark horse candidate. I don't plan on doing a review for that one, but it is really good and really important if you have the chance to see it. And judging by the way the winds are blowing and the industry vibes that I'm privy to, I think it's really going to come down to Sentimental Value versus No Other Choice for the crown. This review is entirely spoiler-free, so have no fear if you haven't had the chance to see the film yet. You are safe here.
실직은 하고 싶어서 안 돼. 아니다.
여기 적힌 것들 자제하기. 아빠 취직할 때까지. 나 테니스 포기. 내 차. 그리고 우리 집.
The great Lee Byung-hun stars as Yoo Man-soo, a family man who loses his job in the paper industry after American businessmen get involved and conduct mass layoffs, which leads to the first of the many name drops of the title. This script revels in concocting scenarios for various characters to naturally slip in. I had no other choice. When trying to get a new job that pays enough to support his family, he faces stiff competition and resorts to essentially becoming a serial killer that specifically targets the other people qualified for the position in order to make himself the only candidate. It's a fun and clever premise that is positively dripping with social commentary. Capitalism is a broken system that will literally drive people to murder. That's the permanently timely and socially relevant starting point for this concept. And even better, the film is not content to just sit back and ride that strong central theme all the way to the finish line, instead expanding and digging deeper on that thematic territory. I'm sure many will compare No Other Choice to Parasite, since it's another South Korean film conveying similar social commentary, and they do both strike a somewhat similar tonal balance between thriller and comedy. But I don't think there's much point in comparing them beyond that, except where the Academy is concerned, since No Other Choice could well become the second South Korean film to take home an Oscar.
나는 내 식구들 입에 밥을 넣어주기 위해 무슨 짓이든 한다. 어쩔 수가 없다.
Park Chan-wook was the filmmaker that first sparked my passion for South Korean cinema. Way back in middle school, I came across the Old Boy hammer fight out of context on YouTube, and I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I watched that one scene over and over again until I was finally able to see the entire film, and when I did, it expanded my adolescent brain's understanding of what cinema could be. At that point in time, it was the single best film I had ever seen, and it still lands extremely high up on my list of the top 250 best films ever made. I began seeking out and watching any South Korean film I could get my hands on, which of course included all of Park Chan-wook's other films. It also included many Lee Byung-hun films. I'm a huge fan of the guy. His forays into American cinema haven't fared quite as well, but I Saw the Devil, A Bittersweet Life, and The Good, the Bad, and the Weird are all certified classics in my book. As is Joint Security Area, which saw him working with Park Chan-wook for the first time back in 2000. No Other Choice is only their second feature film together, though they did collaborate on one of the segments of the Three Extremes horror anthology with strong results. That's a fun horror anthology. I was used to seeing Lee Byung-hun play dramatic, tough, cool characters, so it brought me great delight to see him absolutely nail the comedic elements of this role. There's still plenty of drama for him to sink his teeth into, and he shines there as usual, of course, but he also especially impressed with killer physical comedy chops and perfectly dialed in little facial expressions and mannerisms that make moments so much funnier than they would be otherwise. The specific way he slips down some stairs, attempts to walk nonchalantly under pressure, or leans to the side to get the sun out of his eyes, are all such brilliant little comedic performance details. Just like with Brad Pitt in Burn After Reading or Ryan Gosling in The Nice Guys and Barbie, Lee Byung-hun is another suave leading man that should be allowed to go full goofy more often. No Other Choice has a hilarious script to begin with, and Lee Byung-hun's performance elevates the comedy.
특별한 일 없으셨습니까?
Though it feels deeply rooted in the present day and in South Korean culture, No Other Choice is actually an adaptation of an American novel from 1997, which further speaks to the unfortunate universality and timelessness of its themes. That novel is The Axe by Donald E. Westlake, which was previously brought to screen in 2005 by Costa Gavras of Z fame. For No Other Choice, Park Chan-wook co-wrote the adapted screenplay with a handful of collaborators, including Canadian actor and writer Don McKellar, who also co-created and co-wrote the television series The Sympathizer with Park Chan-wook, which is also worth watching, by the way. No Other Choice has a great script that really elevates the fundamentals while streamlining the setup and crafting opportunities for Park Chan-wook to just kind of get wild and creative in the director's chair. There are several moments in the film that aren't strictly necessary, and they seem to be in there for no other reason than that they're just good old-fashioned fun. And that can be wonderful sometimes. You can feel Park Chan-wook just kind of playing around and having fun. I was particularly impressed by the script's numerous ingenious setups and payoffs. Every worthwhile payoff demands a proper setup. That's a basic tenet of screenwriting. But far too often, either the setup, the payoff, or both are mishandled or telegraphed too obviously. A solid setup that slips past without the audience clocking it as a setup in the moment is oh so satisfying, especially for the screenwriter part of my brain. And No Other Choice is chock full of brilliant setups and payoffs. But for as good as the script is, Park Chan-wook is on a whole different plane of existence in terms of directing. A couple of films back, I began referring to him as a cinemagician, as so many of his shots and sequences have the astonishing and beguiling effect of a great magic trick. And nowhere is that more apparent than in No Other Choice. Every shot is not only striking in dynamic and varied ways, but also cleverly conceived and masterfully executed. There are countless shots and sequences in No Other Choice that will leave you scratching your head if you attempt to suss out precisely how they were pulled off. This is the work of a master filmmaker, not just excelling at his craft, but also taking the time to show off a little while he's at it.
그 두 분이 사라지셨어요.
I still believe Oldboy is Park Chan-wook's best movie overall, but No Other Choice does find him at the absolute top of his game as a visual stylist. In this way, I'm reminded of the trajectory of Wes Anderson. Odd comparison, I know, but stick with me. Moonrise Kingdom and Rushmore are my favorite Anderson films, but there's no denying that works like Grand Budapest Hotel or his Roald Dahl collection display a further refinement of his signature aesthetic and represent the peak of that Wes Anderson style. That's a similar case to what we have here with Park Chan-wook, where I find Oldboy, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, and The Handmaiden to be the stronger overall films, whereas Decision to Leave and No Other Choice represent the absolute pinnacle of that Park Chan-wook style, even if they don't quite hit that perfect sweet spot for me that those aforementioned films do. And that does largely come down to the script, but don't let me be misunderstood. That's not meant as any indictment of the script or the performances or anything else in No Other Choice, because it is exceptionally strong in all regards. I just get the feeling that there's a little something missing, some tiny component that would really tie everything together and leave me calling No Other Choice an unabated masterpiece. I've had a tough time trying to put my finger on exactly what that is, but it ultimately has to do with the way things are paced and wrap up in the third act. The actual ending is phenomenal. It deepens the social commentary and it puts the thematic cherry on top of the film. But the immediate lead up to that ending felt just a little bit rushed, like certain moments that should have been explored were instead skipped over or streamlined. And like certain plot threads weren't fully given enough attention to feel earned and resolved. That's not to say that the third act completely drops the ball or that it isn't still satisfying, because it doesn't drop the ball and it is still satisfying. However, it is really the only aspect of No Other Choice that doesn't live up to the exceedingly high bar set by the rest of the film. I'm curious if a second watch would leave me feeling differently about that third act, and to be honest, I do find myself wanting to watch it again already. It's a really strong piece of work, and it gets an 8.5 out of 10 from me. Thanks for watching. You can see more reviews in the playlist that's on screen now. If you have some disposable income and you want to help out, head on over to the Patreon where you get insider information, early videos, bonus videos, things like that. I'll see you next time. So long.